Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. I'm Kin Ka Tse, and I'll be doing the stream for the programming fundamentals and conditional statements. Welcome, everyone. And before we get started, I just want to get a little background of everyone. So feel free to say your name and talk about what type of background you came from. Just want to get to know everyone a little bit more. I see some questions in chat already. Kendra, I'm going to be using the JavaScript language. All right. While everyone's going to give me a little bit of information about you, I'm going to tell you about myself. So I've been an instructor at App Academy for the New York campus hybrid program for nearly 2 years now. And I chose software engineering because of my passion and creativity. So I had great problem solving skills from mathematics, but I really wanted to pursue something that was creative. So I saw software engineering as sort of a happy medium or in between for the creativity and problem solving skills. And that's how I started App Academy in April of 2021. And then I became an instructor in October of 2021. And I'm coming up on my second year anniversary at App Academy. All right. Anyone else want to give a little bit of a background? Just to get everyone to be familiar with each other as well. All right. Feel free at any point if you join into the stream later or whatever, or you're able to make a comment later, then you can always talk about yourself as well. We're all welcoming here. We all want to get to know each other as well. All right. So let's get started. Gonna add my presentation here. Should be able to see my screen now. Awesome. So we're gonna get started and talk about programming fundamentals. Let me adjust my layout here a little bit so that way I don't block the entire screen, just in case. All right. So for our agenda today, we have that we're going to start with booleans and go into falsy values of JavaScript, as well as and, or, and bang statements or operators. Then we go into if and else statements, as well as else if statements, and talk about scoping and variables. Then we have nested if statements, so if statements within another if statement. And go into a little bit about ternary and switch cases. Now, each of these will have a demo of some form, so hopefully we are able to demonstrate everything as we go. All right. So the next slide here, and actually before I move on, I want everyone to know that if you have any questions at any point, I will take pauses after I'm done communicating a concept and take a look at chat to see what everyone has to offer. All right. So what is a condition? So, when you were a kid and you wanted to hang out with your friends at a party and your parents said no, well, your feeling of frustration and disappointment was noticed by your parents. So they said to you that you could go, but only on one condition. And if that condition is if you were to finish cleaning your room, wash the dishes, and throw the trash, then you can go. But if you don't come back by 10 p.m. tonight, then you are grounded, right? There's a bunch of conditional logic there to say which direction you go in based on your actions, right? It's almost this cause and effect, right? So a condition that is just something that dictates some action depending on another thing. So if you do this, then this happens. If you don't do this, then this happens. But if you do this and you don't do this, then this can happen. All right, I see somebody offering up their background. Welcome, cybersecurity. You are learning how to program. Your first ever goal is to become a software engineer by June 2024, and I hope to eventually get into cybersecurity. Awesome. Love to hear that. Cybersecurity is a very interesting field. I'd love to get into that myself. Um, very complicated though, but I am cheering for you to get to that point by June 2024 and hopefully even earlier. All right. And also welcome to the stream. Hopefully you can take something out of this, and maybe one day when you get into cybersecurity, this these slides echo back to this time for you. All right. Now we have boolean. So boolean is a data type that represents a truthy value. Whether or not something gives a true value or a false value back. And every value is assigned a truthy value, resulting in true or false. You can think of it as a very biased, simplistic perspective of daily objects. So, say, for example, pencils. Pencils are kind of neutral, right? They're not really negative or positive. But if you're going to be very biased about it and say that pencils are pointy and sharp, then they're negative, right? Like, it can potentially hurt you. But you could also say that sugar is tasty, so they're positive, right? So even the most neutral of items you can think of fit in the positive versus negative sort of scope. And because that is how truthy and falsity works, it's all black and white. So everything is basically black and white. All right, let's take a look at some of these falsy values. So we do have 7 or 6 types of falsy values if you include 0 and -0. We have null, we have undefined, we have 0 and -0, we have not a number. An empty string is also considered a falsy value. False it as well, of course, right? And then other values in JavaScript are considered truthy. So true would also be a truthy value. Numbers, arrays, and objects. So it's helpful to keep in mind what is falsy and what is truthy as we move on and talk about conditions, because a condition needs to be true or needs to be met before you can start doing some other execution of code. All right, let's move on. So we have and, or, and bang. And specifically, these are the operators. We have the 2 ampersands here, indicating that this is going to only return true if both expressions result in true as well. So if one of the expressions is false, then the entire expression is false. You can think of it as if this and that, then do something, right? If you wash the dishes and you throw the garbage, then you could go play video games. If you only wash the dishes, but you didn't throw the garbage, you can't play video games. We also have the or operator, which is these 2 pipes indicating that that's going to return true if at least one of the expressions result in true. So if one of the expressions is true, then the entire expression is true regardless of the other expression. So if you, well, think of it as if this or that, then do something, right? So if you wash the dishes or you take out the garbage, then you're allowed to play video games. Then I could take out the garbage and not wash the dishes and then play video games, right? But if I do neither, then I'm not allowed to play video games. Then we finally have the not operator, which is this exclamation in JavaScript simply denotes that we have a bang. That's just usually what we refer to it as. And the bang operator changes the truthy value of a value. So if an expression has a bang in front of it, then the truthy value is now considered reversed. So if it was originally true, then it becomes false because this bang is in front of it. You can think of it as if not this, then do something. All right, let's take a look at our chat, see how we're doing. All right. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Now we're actually getting into the meat and potatoes. So we have if else. So as you can see here, we have a simple function that's going to console log I am now eating. And then we also have this, this variable declaration of hungry that's going to be equal to true. So if I am hungry, which is true, then I will simply run the function in here, which is to console log I am now eating. So if that's the case, let's take a look at this in our demo. So let's open up our VS Code, and let me make this bigger. Should be big enough, but let me know if this is a little too small and I can adjust it. How about I take my face out of the picture so that way you guys can see the entire screen. And let me know if that's a little bit too small. Whoops. Let's go back to here. All right. So let's write out some of that, some of the things that we saw on the slide. So we had a function, right? And we're going to declare this to be eat. And then we'll just say that all this function does is console log I am now eating. Awesome. All right. And that's just a separate execution of code that it would only run upon invoking it. If we did something like eat and invoke it with parentheses, then we would then see that the console would print out I am now eating. In fact, let's just try this out. So how do we test this? So we have a index.html file here that is going to run a couple scripts here, depending on what demo we're using. So all we really want to take a look at right now is the conditions.js, which is specifically this file. So now if I were to open up this file, index.html, then I would have access to taking a look at what is printed in our console. All right, so you can see this hello everyone. But if we inspect the page, you can also see that I am now eating is printed in our console here. And that's because the JavaScript code is running upon the HTML document loading. So not going to get into HTML documents too much here, but just to demonstrate how we are going to test things. All right, so this is invoking this function, which is perfectly fine. But I want to say that I'm only going to eat if I'm hungry. So I should include a if statement here, right? So let's actually create a variable called hungry, set it to true. And I'm going to base it on that factor, on if I am hungry, then I'm going to invoke eat. Right? Simple as that. If I'm hungry, then I simply invoke this function to say that I am now eating. So let's go back to our console. Let me actually make this a little bit bigger. And move this up here. I am now eating. If we refresh the page, it should still say I am now eating. However, if we were to make this false, for example, then we wouldn't actually invoke this function because this condition now is false, right? And by this condition being false, since we don't run this expression, nothing else is run in the code. So we would actually get nothing in our console. Now, just to take a look at the way that we have this syntax real quick, the way that this works is this if keyword denotes that we have a condition afterwards in the parentheses. Based on if this evaluates to a truthy or falsy value, then we will run this condition or whatever's in this expression of this block. So hungry is currently false. We say we don't run this expression. If hungry is true, then we run this expression. All right, glad to hear that the size is good. Thank you, Kendra. All right, whoops, let's go back to here. All right, let's talk about else statements. Else statements are also syntactically placed basically right after the if success block. So if we have an else here, and that kind of reads like English, right? If we are hungry, then we eat. else we don't, right? Or we do something else, right? Let's try to add another function we can include here. Maybe a function to take a nap, right? Maybe we'll just console log, and we'll specifically log, I am now, oh, I'm falling asleep, and midway, I started falling asleep in the middle of my sentence. Okay? So now I'm just going to call the nap function if I am not hungry. Simply put, I'm not hungry, I'm full, maybe, and this would be a good time to take a nap. Okay, let's try to see what happens if I leave hungry as true. Refresh the page, and I can see that I am now eating. I am now eating because hungry is true, evaluating our success block here, and not evaluating what happens if we were to fail that. However, if this was false, then we get the other outcome. We get I am now Z's. Because of the fact that hungry is now a falsy value, the else statement is going to be evaluated. All right, so let's actually take this moment to play around with the other operators that we've learned in the previous slides. So we know that we had the ampersand signs, or the and operator, and the or operator, as well as the bang operator, right? So let's try to make use of that. Let's say maybe I'm hungry and sleepy. What happens if I'm hungry and sleepy? Let's create a new variable. Sorry. Let's create a new variable and set it to true for now. And we'll say that hungry is also true. And let's say that if somebody is hungry and sleepy, then they're going to eat and then they're going to nap, right? Let's add another function here that is maybe called watch TV. In the case that I'm not hungry or sleepy, then I'm going to choose to watch TV. So let's console log. Got nothing better to do. And over here in this else statement, I'm just going to invoke watch TV. Awesome. So because of the way this is set up, hungry is true. I'm currently hungry. Sleepy is true. I'm currently also sleepy. That means that the ampersand sign evaluates to true because both statements here are true. So since this entire condition ends up becoming true, then this this block here is the one that's going to be executed. If either one of these becomes false, then we watch TV. So let's see how that looks in our console now. You see now it prints out both. It will console log I am now eating as well as I am now Z's. All right. So one more thing we're going to want to maybe do to show off here is how we can maybe substitute these values in our own head, right? So we know that hungry is a value, right? That is maybe true, right? You can almost replace that because it's just a variable containing true. Same thing as sleepy, it's also a variable containing true, right? So since both of these are true, and the ampersand here will be an operator returning to us the value between these running through that operator, that would end up becoming true overall. And since this is now true, we know that that fulfills the first condition, and we can run the first condition. Now, this also occurs if we had other truthy values in here, right? Say we had a truthy value like 15 and 20. It doesn't really make sense for what hungry and sleepy is. Maybe you can put some value to how hungry or sleepy you are out of 100, I guess. But these are considered truthy values, right? So if we were to go back to our console, refresh, that we see that these are still running. So what happens if we make them false, right? So if both of them are false, then naturally we would expect that we're both not hungry and sleepy. Of course, we're going to watch TV. Got nothing better to do, right? Let's refresh the page, and we indeed have nothing better to do. Okay, then what happens if one of these values is true? What do we think? Let's get some answers in chat. What happens if one of these values is true? What happens if hungry is true and sleepy is false? And what happens if sleepy is true and hungry is false? Which block of code would be ran here? What do we think? All right. Seems like maybe there's a big delay, but yes, the second block. Thank you. So it would indeed be the second block because we have now evaluated that this is a false overall. How? Because the ampersand, the and statement, is only checking when one of these values, when one of these values is true, when one of these values is false, then the entire thing is false. So that being the case, if one of these is false, in this case it's sleepy, then we're going to hit our else statement. Let's take a look. And we have nothing better to do. So what happens if we use or? If we use or in this situation, we would probably actually hit something else, right? We would hit eat and nap because the way it works is that at least one of these values is true. We have to get either hungry to be true or sleepy to be true. Let's try it out now. I am eating and I am now Z's. All right. And if we were to swap these values, false and true here, we would still get the same evaluation because at least one of these values is true. Now, if both values are false, then we would expect that, of course, we're still going to get watching TV, nothing better to do. Whereas if both were true, then we would also anticipate that we would get eat and nap. Because you're filling at least one of the conditions. All right. All right. Thank you, cybersecurity. I see that you maybe there was just a delay in the chat, but it says that you believe that because you are not hungry and sleepy, then watching TV comes up. Yes. If one of them is false for an AMP operator, then it will get into the else statement. Okay. Let's head back into our slides. Or actually, there is the not operator we didn't get a chance to see yet. Let's take a look at how that would affect things. So I'm going to go back to and because that makes more sense. If I am hungry and sleepy, then I would eat and nap. If only one of them, then I would watch TV. So what happens if I say maybe I am not sleepy? Right? If I put bang not sleepy, then maybe it makes more sense to put nap down here, right? Or after watching TV. Because what this is saying is that I am currently hungry and I'm also not sleepy, right? This bang operator acts as a not. You can think of this as literally putting a not here, right? Or in English, right? So if I'm not sleepy, then I'm going to eat. But if I'm sleepy at all, then I am going to choose to watch TV and then nap. Let's see how that changes things. So currently both hungry and sleepy are true. Let's refresh the page. And now I'm going to get that I'm watching TV, got nothing better to do, and I am now Z's. And why that is because sleepy is true. So evaluating to the opposite value, it would give us false. So this entire statement becomes false, right? And so as long as we have a single false when we have the AND operator, that means we are not going to evaluate this first expression. We're going to evaluate the next expression. All right. Any questions about this? All right, Kendra, great question. So it is a little out of scope of today, but just to go over this again, we have this JavaScript file that is going to be imported into this HTML document. And this HTML document is specifically what we opened up on the browser. So since we have this HTML document loading up, anything in here is also executing. And with this script tag specifically, is saying to load our conditions.js file, which we have right here. All right. Yep, no problem. Any other questions for now? All right. If I see any other questions later on, I can always come back. Chat might be a little bit delayed though. So let's go back to our slides for now. Let's talk about else if. And this is very similar, and it sounds weird because before we were on if else, but that was with a slash, and denoting that you have two separate statements. Else if is also a separate statement. It's essentially allowing us to say that we could have a case where more potentially there's more than two options or situations, right? Saying that if I'm hungry, then I eat. Else, if I'm sleepy, then I nap. Else, if I'm neither hungry or sleepy, then I'm going to watch TV. So this makes more sense for our current situation because if you're hungry and sleepy, maybe you don't necessarily want to do both eating and napping, right? But if you are hungry, then you're definitely going to eat. If you are sleepy, then you're definitely going to nap, right? So let's go back to into our code here, and let's do some adjustments here. So we do have the hungry and sleepy here is equal to true, but let's readjust this so that we have an else if included. So we're going to remove sleepy here. So we know that when somebody's hungry, that they're going to eat. But if somebody is sleepy, we're going to include that here with an else if. This else if is allowing us essentially a third scenario to take place. And I got to open up the block here as well. Oh, whoops, actually that's good. And in this case, if somebody is sleepy, then we run some execution of code. So that execution of code in this case is to take a nap. So again, if somebody's hungry, they're going to invoke that eat function, which is going to console log I am now eating. If somebody is sleepy and the value is true, then we're going to invoke the nap function, which is going to give us a console log of I am z's. And then if neither of these are true, then we would then get watch TV, which watch TV is going to print out got nothing better to do. Now keep in mind that it can only get to the watch TV point had it passed through both of these conditions first and failed both of these conditions. So let's take a look at what happens. Right now we currently have both of them truthy. Yep, we're on the else if demo. And let's refresh the page. And I see now that I am now eating. So even though I am technically sleepy right now, I'm only going to execute the situation in which my first statement was fulfilled, which the very first statement that our condition was true for is hungry. That means I'm going to execute eat and move along, right? So maybe we can do a console.log and say that code has finished. let's go back here, refresh the page, and you see I am now eating, code has finished. It has only taken this route, essentially. It has not taken any of these other conditions. It has not executed them, and it will now then run console log, code has finished. All right. Okay, and then at this point, maybe you aren't hungry. You can say that you are sleepy instead, right? But because this hungry is now false, we would then skip this first condition. And we would meet where sleepy is true and recognize that we should run this execution of code here. So let's take a look. To refresh our page, I am now Z's. Awesome. So we are now napping here because we have we're not hungry, right? That's one of the conditions. And then we are sleepy. Now, would the order actually matter here if we were to flip these around and put sleepy over here and nap over here? Let's try it out. Sleepy, nap, and put hungry down here instead, and eat. So now it should check the other way around, right? So let's see if anything changed. All right, nothing seems to have changed. But what if we make both of these true as we did before? If we make both of these true as we did before, we originally got eating, right? We originally got I am now eating. What do we now get? Now we still get I am now Z. So the order of how you set up your conditions matter, right? Because this is not just, this is saying if sleepy is true, right? And true or false, we'll get nap. But this is also saying, not only is it saying that if hungry is true or false, but it's also checking that sleepy has to be false in order to get to this point, right? In order to get to this point, sleepy has to be false. So the order that you set this up will actually have a factor. All right, we'll revert it back to what it was. And what if both of these was false? If both of these was false, then neither of these conditions were met, and we would naturally expect to hit the else, which is almost our catch-all, saying that any of these conditions are not met, then this is the one that will always be our last line of defense. And as you see that since both statements were false, we had nothing better to do. Okay. One thing to note is that sometimes it's okay to have an if condition without an else. The else, what the else does is essentially just catch everything that didn't meet the other conditions, right? But if you don't have an else, then it just continues to run the rest of your code, right? So for example, and I'm just going to comment this code out. I'm going to say down here, if hungry, oops, let's put my parentheses around to indicate that we have a condition here. If I'm hungry, then I'm going to eat, right? I'm not going to have an else here, right? But what I will have is I'm going to say watch TV and nap. So what I'm doing is that no matter I'm hungry or not, I'm always going to watch TV and then nap, right? Because if I'm hungry, then I eat. But regardless, afterwards, I'm going to do these two things. Because there's no condition to tell us to not to, right? So you can always have an if statement where, oh, my hungry is currently false. That's why we don't see all three. Let's make this a true. And now you can see I am now eating, got nothing better to do, and I am now disease. So you can always have an if statement without an else, and then that would just simply run the rest of your code that you would maybe like to, right? Same thing that could happen with the else, right? We could also have an else here, where we have nap if you are sleepy. And in all cases, we're always going to, oh, actually, this is a common mistake that a lot of people usually have, is that they try to add another condition on top of the else. But the else is a catch-all, so no matter what happens, as long as all the other conditions fail, this is always met. So we never want to actually put an explicit condition there, unless we say else if, right? Then it won't have an error. But in this case, this will make sure that we eat, and if we're not hungry, then we will make sure we nap. And regardless if we nap or eat, we're going to watch TV. So in this case, I'm now eating, and then I'm watching TV because I've got nothing better to do. But if I made this the other way around, and you know what, I can even leave sleepy to be false. It doesn't matter because my condition here isn't checking sleepy at all. It's just checking that hungry is false. So I am now disease, got nothing better to do, because with this execution of code, will run no matter what. All right. Again, if there are any questions, feel free to put them in chat. I will pause and take a look at them to answer. All right, let's go back to our slides for now. And let's briefly talk about scoping and variables. I actually did a nice live stream about scope and variables a few weeks back. So you can check our App Academy YouTube channel under the live section and get a better understanding of scope and variables there. But the reason why we want to discuss this here is because the if statements open up a block. This essentially creates a new scope for the type of variables we use. So in this case, we're going to be using the let variables since we are focusing on if statements, which are block scoped, and specifically let variables are affected by block scopes. But we do have other variables if you wanted to look into them. Again, we could always you could always refer to the other stream where I go in depth about them. So let's take a look at how this is affected. Let's go into our code, and I have something nice and neat already set up for us in our party.js. So, and in order to make sure that our code is running on party.js, I'm going to comment in party.js in our index.html so that this script here is ran in JavaScript. And then we're going to comment our original JavaScript file, so that way we don't have anything else confusing us. We're isolating it to just this party.js file, so we can worry about anything console logged in here. All right, so this demo here, it kind of goes back to our original concept of if you're trying to go to a party, you have to fulfill some chores before you can go to the party, right? So what we have here is some chores that are all variables that are going to be variables to start, right? Well, they're going to be variables all throughout, and they're going to be set to false, right? So very, very simple so far. We basically just have and operators for all these values, and since all these values are false, we're definitely not going to the party. We did not wash our dishes, we did not fold our laundry, we did not throw the garbage, and we did not finish homework. So we're not going to the party. I'm staying home. However, my parents said that I need to finish all of them, right? So even if I just wash dishes, right, this is true. These three are false. So I cannot go to the party. I have to stay at home. Even if I did 3 of the chores, but I didn't do my homework, then I still have to stay at home because that's how and statements work here, right? And operators. If this was an or operator, that's a different story. But let's take a look at what is console logged currently. Let's go into our inspect here, and we can see that I stay at home. Sad face. That's because, again, we have a single false statement, and that will make it so that we don't actually finish our homework and we have to stay at home. We run this expression of code instead. If these were or statements, then that's a totally different story. Let's make these or statements, or operators, and let's refresh the page. I can now go to the party. Why? Because this is essentially your parents saying, you only have to do one of these chores in order to go to the party. You have to do at least one. And so even if three of these were false, and all I did was wash the dishes, then I am actually allowed to go to the party. As we refresh the page, we can see that our console log does show I can go to the party. All right. But that is not what we're here for. We want to talk about scoping and variables. So let's add some complexity to this, where we create a new variable, and we'll call this action, right? And this action is going to change depending on what condition I fulfill. So let's just start off by saying I have to stay home, right? And we're going to comment this part out, but we will keep this one if condition to refer to. And let's change these back to and statements. Awesome. And then what we're going to do is, if I wash my dishes, I fold the laundry, I throw the garbage, and I finish my homework, then I can go to the party, right? So I'm going to take this variable of the action and change that value to be I can go to the party. After doing that, then I'm going to simply console log the action. So I'm going to make everything true to start, meaning that I have washed my dishes, fold my laundry, throw the garbage, and finish my homework. So the action should now change or reassign the value to be I can go to the party. Let's take a look. As we see, it does say I can go to the party. However, if I simply make one of these false, if I didn't throw the garbage, then the action is now that I have to stay home. So what's happening is that even though I created this action variable outside of the scope of this if block, I can still access the action variable, and I can still reassign the value and changing it so that the action outside of this block scope is going to reflect the value that we changed it to. Now, where this actually becomes a little bit more tricky is when we try to use variables that were initialized in a nested scope. So, for example, if I comment this part out, and I'm going to say, or actually, you know what? I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to comment this part out. Or to make it a little bit more clear, how about I remove all the other code? And what I'm going to do now is, let's go back to the code. What I'm going to do now is try to, let's try to go back to our browser and refresh the page. All right, we get an error. We get an uncaught reference error. Action is not defined. So the general rule of thumb is that with block scope variables, you do not have access to variables that are nested deeper than the current scope you're on. So this is a block that's initiated by the if, right? And since this action here was declared inside of here, we cannot access the action variable outside of this block scope. However, with what we had before, this action variable was declared outside of the scope of this, so we are able to access this on the same scope, which is the outer scope. So you can always change the variable of a within a inner scope, but you cannot initialize a variable in an inner scope and use that variable. Again, all of this I go in much more detail in my other live stream. All right. Let's refresh the page, make sure everything is working. I have to stay at home. Versus if I made all of these, true, I did all of them, then I can go to the party. All right. Awesome. All right. So let's go back to our slides. We have, I believe, 2 more sections to go through, and then we're going to be done. And then I open up for some questions. But again, if there are any questions, feel free to put them up. I'll take a look at them. All right. Let's talk about nested if statements. So a nested if statement is allowing us to have a if condition inside of another if condition. This provides a scenario where you can actually add a condition after another condition was met. So, for example, let's go back to our demo with the party here. What if my parents said, if you do your homework, then you are allowed to play video games. But if you do all your chores, then you can go to the party. So there is a condition after after a condition was met. So let's take a look at how we can formulate this. Let's comment all this out and have something else to work with. Actually, you know what? This is fine. We're going to instead just simply have another condition here saying if finish homework, then we do something, right? So I'm going to copy all this and actually move it up here. And now we have a nested if condition, right? We no longer need this and finish homework inside because we're saying if I finish my homework, then I can do something. But if I don't do any of the chores, then I'm not allowed to go to the party, right? So let's see what happens if I have an if else in here, where the action changes to I am allowed to play video games instead. Right. So again, how this works is that if I finish my homework, then I change the action. I definitely change the action. I change it to either I can go to the party or I am allowed to play video games instead. So since I finished my homework, since it's true, if I make all these false, then it checks these conditions and notices that we get false as a result. So we don't get action is that I can go to the party. Instead, my action is that I am allowed to play video games instead. And then that is what is console logged. So what if I finish my homework? Or actually, let's show this in the demo real quick. You see that I am allowed to play video games instead because I finished my homework. I'm not allowed to go to the party, but at least I can play video games. All right. So what if we change these values to all true? If I finish my homework, then I also did all my chores, then I can go to the party, right? Let's take a look. I can now go to the party. Awesome. All right, what if I did all my chores, but I didn't actually finish my homework? If I didn't finish my homework, then I'm not allowed to do either of these things, right? Because this if condition is first based on if I can finish my homework or not. So I have to stay at home. I need to do my homework. Very sad. Can't go to the party and I can't play video games. All right. Now, what if my parents said, if you do your homework, then you're allowed to play video games. But if you do any other chore in addition, then you can go to the party. But if you do all the chores, then you can skip school tomorrow. Wow, that's an incentive. I'm definitely going to want to do all the chores, right? But they did say if I did any chore, then at least I can go to the party, right? And if I at least do my homework, then I am allowed to play video games. So how will that look? Well, we know that if we did all the chores and did our homework, then the action is not that I can go to the party anymore, but that I can skip school tomorrow and go to the party. Awesome. But we're also going to have an if else here, right? Because potentially I do one of these options. So let's have an if else, an else if, apologies. And in this else if, I'm just going to say action is equal to something else. Oh yeah, I need a condition here. Let's make sure that we have that condition stating that if one of these conditions is filled, then I can say I can go to the party. So let's review this again. I have to at the very least finish my homework. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to stay at home. If I finish my homework, then it's gonna be based on some chores. If I finish my homework, at the very least, I can play video games. If I do no chores, right? If I finish my homework and do maybe one of the chores, then I can go to the party. If I finish my homework and I do all the chores, not only do I get to go to the party, but I can skip school tomorrow. So let's see what happens if all the chores are done, but I didn't finish my homework. Since the very first requirement here is that I finish the homework, I would expect that I have to stay at home. And indeed, I do. Okay, what happens if I finish my homework and I did all the chores? Awesome. Let's go to our browser. I can skip school tomorrow and go to the party. Wow. Now, what happens if I were to forget to throw out the garbage? Well, that fills this situation where we have that I did 2 of the 3 chores, but not all. So I can go to the party, but I won't skip school. All right. Let's take a look back at our slides. I see there's been no questions. Feel free to put in any questions if there are. All right. So next thing we're going to talk about is ternary. And ternary is simply just a shortcut to make some if conditions a little more simpler to read, right? So for example, here we have a variable holding a value is true. It would give us a true or false, right? And then return to us a value of a string of great or a value returning string of boo, right? And this is a more simplistic way of saying that your if else statement will generally take up multiple lines, right? In this very case, it would probably take up 5 lines, right? However, this ternary function, this syntax for it, allows us to keep it on 1 line. How it does that is that this question mark is what denotes that we're looking at a ternary. It tells us that whatever this evaluates to, true or false, we have the first option to go with if it's true, and the second option to go with if it's false. And generally, we only do this if our result of the condition is generally small and simple code. If it's complex code, then we're not going to use ternary. It's just to keep things a little bit more compact. Let's take a look at our ternary demo. So in our ternary demo, we have basically the same sort of demo we had before, right? But as you can see that this little if else statement here does take quite a bit of space, right? Just to make sure that the action can be set to either eat or sleep. And let's make sure that we are showing off specifically the ternary by commenting in that JavaScript code. And if we go back to our inspect here on the browser, you can see that we are returning eat. That is because hungry is true, right? And if I put a bang here, that means hungry is now false right? And it's going to make it so that I sleep. So that's very simple, right? However, this is quite a lot of code, or quite a lot of lines for very simple code. So we can condense this and simply make it a ternary function. So our statement we're trying to check the truthy or falsy for is this hungry variable. And the key indicator that we're using ternary is this question mark. Then we have essentially option 1 and option 2, right? Option 1 versus option 2. Option 1 here is just going to make it so that our action is eat, right? So let's say action is equal to eat. Option 2 is in the case that we want to sleep. So action equals sleep. So again, this is checking for the truthy value of hungry. If it is true, then we set action to eat. If it is false, then we evaluate the second part of this ternary function. And then we render out the console log. So we see that it is currently eat because hungry is true, and so we evaluate it first. And if we simply change hungry to false, then that's going to make it so that we sleep. All right. All right, and the very last thing we're going to talk about is the switch case. So to take a look at the switch case, we see here that this is also another way so that we can create conditional logic in JavaScript, but just using different syntaxes. So, for example, we have a switch keyword indicating that based on some sort of condition, that it could result, this condition could result in either the case of green or the case of red or some other case. And based on what that evaluates to, it runs that specific case, right? And by running that specific case, then we also need to say that we're breaking out of this case, so we don't run any other cases. So, for example, if condition is a variable that holds a string value of green, then we actually successfully hit this case. And by hitting this case, then we are going to console log green. And then we break out of the statement. Now, this default down here is specifically a catch-all. It's almost like the else version of the if-else, right? So if none of these cases were fulfilled, then we hit this default. All right. Let's get into our switch case demo. So for our switch case demo, we're again needing to go back to our index.html and specifically running the switch code. Okay, back over to here, we have a different little demo here where we have the chore variable, which can be reassigned multiple times, and an action variable, which also will be reassigned depending on what the chore variable holds, right? So we can see that the chore variable can confirm the value of it if it's equal to another string, right? By checking the triple equal sign. So the triple equal sign is comparing two values. So the single equal sign is taking a variable of something and setting it to a new value. So that is a distinction between these three, between these two operators. So since chore right now doesn't have a value, that's technically going to be undefined, and undefined does not actually equal a string of wash dishes, then we move on to our next else if, right? So we move on to our next else if, and we're seeing that the chore here is still undefined, and checking if that's equal to fold laundry. All right, that's false. So we move on to our next else if. Again, we check if chore is equal to throw garbage. That's false. Move on again. Then we check if chore is equal to finish homework. That's still false, and we hit our final catch-all, which is the else. And in this else, we are going to set the action to I have to stay home. And then we would console log that. So let's take a look here. Refresh the page, and we see that we do have to stay home. But if I change the chore variable to be wash dishes, that means I have now indicated that I have specifically washed dishes. So maybe I'll get pizza for Friday night. Let's take a look. I do indeed get pizza for Friday night. Awesome. That's tomorrow. Can't wait. What if I chose to fold my laundry? Let's see what happens. I will get new clothes. Awesome. Okay. What about in a different scenario where I threw out the garbage? Oh, wow, look at that. My parents will clean my room for me. And then in our last scenario, if I finish the homework, what happens? I can go to the party. All right. So as we saw, this is sort of creating a situation where if one of these chores is done, we hit this specific scenario, right? And we can see that that was a little bit tedious to get this to be done, right? What if we wanted to make this a little bit easier using our newfound knowledge of what switch statements do? So in order to best do this, let's write this down here and say switch. And we put in the specific condition that could change, right? And what case it will hit will be dependent on our cases later. So we can say specifically the chore. The chore is a value that will change dynamically, right? And based on that chore, we have different case scenarios, right? We have the case where it's equal to wash dishes, right? And then you have a colon to denote what we do in that case. So after every case, we're going to have a break just to make sure that we can break out of it after executing some code. I'm just going to write out the switch case in every single scenario that we could potentially have. So we have maybe another case in which we are folding laundry. And then we can break out of this after doing some execution of code. We have another case where we throw the garbage out and break out of this. And one more case where we finish homework, right? In each individual case, we do something else, right? But finally, we also need a default, saying that it's almost similar to the else here. We do something in case, we don't do any of these cases, right? The chore doesn't match any of these cases. So in this case, the action is simply, I have to stay home. Not that I want to. All right. And all of these actions will happen depending on which case we hit. So in the case that we hit that we wash dishes, the action is now going to be, you get pizza for Friday night. In the case of folding laundry, the action we have is that we get new clothes. In the case of throwing garbage, we get to have our parents clean our room. And if we finish our homework, then we can go to the party. So I'm going to comment this code out and make sure that this is running. And I'm going to move this all the way to the bottom. Okay. I see that my indentation got messed up because of that. Let's fix this real quick. You know what? Let's just undo all this and copy all this to the bottom instead. All right, awesome. So now we can focus on just what's over here. So what we can do first is check what happens when the chore is undefined. When the chore is undefined, do we hit the case of wash dishes? No. Do we hit the case of fold laundry? No. Do we hit the case of throw garbage? No. Do we hit the case of finish homework? No. We hit the default case. So of course, if we did no chore, then I'm going to have to stay home. Let's take a look. And indeed, I have to stay home. what happens if I wash the dishes? If I wash the dishes, then what's going to happen is that the chore will actually hit this case, right? Because it's essentially using the comparator operator, the triple equal sign, saying that chore is equal to this and evaluating this. Let's take a look, and I will get pizza Friday night. Now it's important to have this break so that we know that we don't run any other switch case just in case. It's also part of the syntax in order to make sure that we have something to exit our switch case. You can also return, but something like that is also essentially breaking out. All right, let's try to fold the laundry. Yes, we will indeed get new clothes, because it is hitting the case where we folded the laundry. And then what happens if we try to throw out garbage? If we throw out garbage, we should probably hit this case, and my parents will come to clean my room. All right, and in our final scenario, we have that we are going to finish homework, and then we can go to the party. Let's see if that's correct. Indeed, it is. All right. So at this point, is there any questions for the rest of this? Because I believe we have finished everything. All right. Any questions? I see that somebody said that my mic is breaking up. I apologize if my mic is breaking up. If there's anything that you want me to go over again, I can take the next few minutes to go over them. All right. Any questions? All right. Well, it's a pleasure to meet some of you. Cyber security. Hope you end up becoming a software engineer, and keep me updated on the journey. I will have a LinkedIn, so if you want to follow me and keep in touch, feel free to do so. You could just look me up. Let's see. Let me see if I can find my LinkedIn real quick. Should just be, where is it? Aha, there it is. I had to log in. And I'll put my LinkedIn on the screen. Just give me a moment. And I'm going to add a new slide just for that. And this goes for anyone. If you want to stay in contact, I am more than willing to talk to you on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me. All right. I see our bot is doing its work. If you want to get the curriculum free, you can also take a look at that through that link in the chat. You can also join the Discord, be up to date with any of the App Academy students joining, or any App Academy instructors, or any App Academy resources. All right. Well, it was a pleasure to meet some of you and also get to teach some of you. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out. All right. Have a great night, everyone.